Hello, and welcome to Southern Tier Gardening. My name's Eric. Today is March 20th, and I'm super excited for today's video. It's just been an amazing day so far. The reason I'm so happy and enjoying the day so far is because I am planting tomatoes today. One of my favorite things to do in the garden. If I had to pick my favorite crop to grow, it would definitely be tomatoes. So today I just wanted to talk in a little bit more detail about how I plant tomatoes, when, and what I use, what I fertilize them with. So let's get going. First of all, tomatoes like warm weather. You don't want to plant these outdoors when it's cold. My average last frost date here is March 1st. So you want to plant tomatoes well after your last frost date. Ideally, they even like nighttime temperatures to be in the 50s minimum, as far as when to plant them. So those are the conditions I've got. I don't think we're going to have any more frosts. At least I hope not. So today I'm planting tomatoes. So first of all, there's two main types of tomatoes. You're going to see tomatoes that are labeled as determinate or indeterminate. I'm growing some of each. There are significant differences with these two types of tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes, which I'm planting over here in these rows, are tomatoes that are going to grow to a predetermined height. They're not going to get as tall as the indeterminates. Determinate tomatoes will get about 4 feet tall. They tend to set all the tomatoes at the same time. So all your tomatoes will be ripe and ready to harvest at the same time. So that's why determinate tomato varieties tend to be the types of tomatoes that you would use to make sauce or to can, because you're going to have a lot of tomatoes ripe at the same time. So I am planting this year a variety of, well, I'm doing two determinants, but one variety is called Celebrity. I've grown this tomato before. It's grown really well for me. It's an F1 hybrid. Just a good tomato. It has great disease resistance. It grows well in my area. So that's what I'm growing for determinate. Now your indeterminate tomatoes, they tend to be the more popular ones for home gardeners. They're your big beefsteak tomatoes. So, but they grow much, much bigger than determinants. Indeterminate tomatoes are more of a vine, and they will just keep growing and growing, really until they either die from disease or your first frost. So over here is where I'm going to plant my indeterminates, like my cherry tomatoes, and those I use cages for. For my smaller determinate tomatoes, I trellis them with a system called the Florida Weave. And you can see my T-posts here. What I will do is run string from T-post to T-post. Down here are some tomatoes that I've already planted. And as these tomatoes get bigger and taller, they don't grow as uncontrolled and viney as the indeterminates. So these are easier to kind of trellis. So I'm just going to run string down in between them I apologize for my dogs. We have a new dog next door and they're still getting used to each other, so I'm going to keep filming the video, but hopefully they're not barking the entire time. So anyway, I will run string in between these T-posts, and that's what I will use to hold these tomatoes up instead of cages. They just don't get as big. You don't really need cages on these determinate tomatoes. You could, but I found using this T-post and string trellising method is perfect for these tomatoes. So if you remember, this garden bed was the one that I've talked a lot about. This is where I grew my mustard greens over the winter. So this soil is already pretty full of nutrients. So whenever I'm planting, especially if it's a brand new bed, I'm going to use two main products. I use a lot of compost. So after I took the tarp off of this bed, I use this brand of compost. It's called Black Cow. It's a cow manure based compost, and I spread that over the entire bed. Then when I determine and I measure out where specifically my rows are going to be, you can see I do another layer. I use my shovel, and you can see that dark material on top of the soil. That's compost. I spread another layer over the entire row. You really can't add too much compost. I do have a compost bin on my property. I make my own compost, but I'm just not able to produce enough throughout the year. So I do have to supplement that with this store-bought product. But from using my own homemade compost and using that soil amendment technique, that cover crop that I grew over the winter, I'm not having to buy and add as much of this compost to the garden this year. I think I'm going to have plenty of nutrients in this garden to grow my vegetables. So, first step is measure out your row, add some compost to the top, and I just use a metal rake to smooth it out. The next product I like to add is I use a lot of a granular all-purpose fertilizer. I keep it in this bin. It's like little pellets. It's water soluble. When it rains, these granules of fertilizer dissolve. So the next step is I just use a cup, and this is a 16-ounce cup, and I just come to the row and lightly sprinkle this fertilizer over this entire row. And this is specifically where I'm going to be planting these. So, like I say, this is a 16-ounce cup. I'll use the entire cup in this 12-foot row. And then I will come in with the metal rake and just lightly rake that in also. So that prepares the soil. The next step is to actually dig your holes. Now, these types of tomatoes, I plant my rows 3 feet apart. So it's 3 feet in between these two T-posts. That gives the plants themselves plenty of space. I'll have good air circulation. They'll have plenty of sunlight. And then it leaves me the space for a row to walk in between, so I'm not compacting the soil. Then I plant my tomatoes 18 inches apart. These determinate tomatoes can be planted closer together than the big indeterminates. My big indeterminates I do about anywhere from 2 to 3 feet apart, ideally 3 feet apart. But these smaller determinants, you can do 18 inches. So on this row you can see I've dug, let me think about this, 8 holes. And you want to dig the holes nice and deep. And you can see in the bottom of each hole, I dump another full cup of that compost. So each one of these holes has the compost in it. I'll show you on this last one here. I just grab, you can see it's that same 16-ounce cup. I like a standard size 16-ounce. You can, use half a cup or full one. You got, a pint. So just dump that right in the hole. So now you got your holes dug. My tomatoes are spaced 3 feet apart between rows, 18 inches apart between plants. Now, another step I do, into each planting hole, I will sprinkle some more of this fertilizer. This fertilizer is described as a 10-10-10. And when you buy fertilizer products, you're going to see three numbers. If you look on this compost, it says 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Those three numbers stand for the three most important nutrients that you want to have in your garden. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that's what those numbers stand for. So by me using a 10-10-10 fertilizer, that means I have equal parts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that's what you want in your garden. You just want balance. You don't want to buy a fertilizer where one of those numbers is way out of whack, like a 2-2-30. Those fertilizers are for specific applications. Most of the time in beginning gardeners, in the backyard situation, you can, a good balanced 10-10-10 fertilizer is all you need. So the last thing I do is I sprinkle some of this 10-10-10 in the bottom of the planting hole. I also sprinkle it around the top. This is the soil that when I bury my transplant, I will be bringing this soil up over the plant. So I'm incorporating all this fertilizer and this compost directly to where the plant is going to be planted. So you can see that. In addition to putting some compost in the planting hole, I also like to take some compost and just sprinkle it around the top of the hole into that soil that I'm going to then mound back over the plant. So these holes, that's the next step. Now the last step that I do specifically for planting tomatoes is, not everyone would have to add this product, but it's something that I do that's specific to my growing region. Give me 1 second here. My dogs are acting a little crazy. I'm going to try to get them to quiet down here. Come on, Mabes. Good girl. Come on. Why don't you come over here? Come on, you two. Come on. Dad's trying to shoot a video. So, the last product that I use specifically in my garden is, because I grow in sandy soil. I've talked about my soil here. I lose nutrients when it rains and the water soaks through the soil. I lose nutrients quickly. So 2 additional nutrients that tomatoes specifically really like are calcium and magnesium. And those are 2 nutrients that my soil is usually lacking. So I also add this product right into, I use about a handful, probably a 1/4 cup of garden lime, and I put it right into, let's see if I can show you here. I didn't open the bag, but let's see if I can show you. Yeah, this is a granular product. You can see I just take a handful of that, and I've already done it in all the other holes here, but I take that and I sprinkle that in and around the hole too. Now what that garden lime will do is that it will make sure that my tomatoes have enough calcium and magnesium. You look on the back of the bag, you can see, you know, the amounts of calcium and magnesium that are in this product. It's an inexpensive product, it's organic. I always add it to most of my transplants. I used it with my yellow squash. I'm going to use it for all my tomatoes. It's just to further insurance that these plants will have all the nutrients that they need. So the next step after you have your holes dug is to actually put your transplant in the ground. This year I bought these little 6-packs of transplants. And tomatoes, most plants, when you plant them, you're going to plant so the base of the plant is right even with the top of your soil. Tomatoes are an exception. Tomatoes, they will grow roots all the way up and down the stem of the plant. So you want to plant these tomatoes really deep in the ground. That just leads to a stronger plant. That plant is going to grow a lot more roots out of the stem, and it'll have a bigger root structure under the ground. Also, planting the tomato plant deep, if you get high winds, it just gives it some stability when it's young. Now, if you look at like this transplant, see if I can show you here. This transplant, see these lower leaves? What I will do is I will come in and I will pinch those lower leaves off. And you want to plant the tomato plant all the way up to those first big leaves at the top. So all that part of the plant will be underground. If you look at this one, I've already taken the lower leaves off of it. See how it's just the stem? And I will plant it all the way up to there in the ground. So just the canopy of the leaves are above the soil. If you look at these over here that I planted this morning, hopefully you can see that. Nice and deep in the ground. And you can see how nice that looks. You just want to, like I say, these tiny little hairs that are on the stems of tomato plants, they will all grow roots. So the next step is just planting your transplants in your holes. And if you look at this row, these plants I have done. And the last step that I like to do is I use these 12-inch dowels. And that just gives the plant support if we have some high winds in the next few days or some heavy storms. These young plants, before they get established and strong, I just like to make sure that they have enough support and they don't get broken over. So that's how I amend my soil to get it ready to plant for tomatoes. You can see how I'm planting them this year in rows. I have 8 plants in each of these 3 rows, so I will have 24 determinate celebrity tomatoes in these 3 rows. And these tomatoes are the ones that I will mainly use to make 2 products that I like to can. I like to make traditional stewed tomatoes, and I like to make salsa. So, what else can we talk about here? Oh, I wanted to show you something cool I found in the garden. I was digging in the garden earlier this morning, and I came across this. I dug this up. Now what this is a sweet potato that was in the ground from last year that I didn't dig up. And it stayed in the ground all through winter. And you can see this spring that it has started to grow a shoot. So this basically would grow into a sweet potato plant. Now I took it out of this garden because I don't want, a sweet potato plant growing in where I have my tomatoes growing. But I just thought that was kind of cool. You could certainly put this into a container, something like that size, and this one plant would probably produce about 12 sweet potatoes. I might just do that. So I thought that was kind of cool. But I found, like I say, I found that when I was digging a garden hole today. So yeah, I hope that information helps. Over here where I have my tomato cages set up, this is where I'm going to plant my big tomatoes, my indeterminates. These are the plants that grow a lot taller. They grow like vines. They'll get 8-9 feet tall, well over the height of these cages. They're my cherry tomatoes. They're more of my heirloom tomatoes, like the Cherokee Purple, the German Johnson. Those tomatoes I'll be planting today. But the process is the same as far as how I dig the hole, compost, fertilizer, plant the tomato deep. The last thing you want to do after you plant these new transplants is water them in really good. I've watered over here. On the end of the garden here, you can see those plants. Those are my yellow squash. So I got my yellow squash. Then I'm going to have my 3 rows of determinate tomatoes. So I hope this video has been helpful. I just wanted to show you there's dozens of ways to grow a tomato. This is a process or a technique that has worked for me in the past. Every year I try to tweak some things and improve on some things. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I can't thank you enough for joining me. And I can't wait to see you next time here at Southern Tier Gardening.